Welcome to a very special episode of the Comic Book Wars podcast. I'm your host, Nico from comicbookspeculation.com, and we're joined here with a very special guest. Steve, would you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Hi, my name is Steve Borock. I'm president and primary grader at CBCS Comics, and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is mine. It's truly an honor. I have so many different questions to ask you, and I really just want to kind of jump into it. For those who are unaware, can you talk a little bit about how CBCS was formed, how long you guys have been in the professional grading and encapsulation business, and how that business started as an idea and came into fruition?
Wow, that's a lot of stuff. Okay. Sure. Basically, as you know, I helped create the first comic book certification service, CGC. I was the president and primary grader there.
And when was that?
From 99 till about 2009. And then got kind of burned out from grading, and went to Heritage, became a senior consignment director there, brought in millions and millions of dollars worth of art and comics. And I got approached by someone, and they wanted to open up a comic book grading service. I kind of said, not that into it. But this time I could own it. And that made a big difference. And I'd have a say on exactly how things should be run. I wanted to be more hobby friendly. And did a lot of talking and research. And after, about a year of discussion and negotiation, we opened it up, hired some of the best people in the industry, and people took to it quite quickly. We needed, I guess, competition in the hobby.
So let's talk about that. Do you like energy drinks?
Not really, no.
Okay. Well, they're a big deal, right? And for a long time, there was just Red Bull.
Mm-hmm.
Enter the competition. My favorite, Monster. Why is competition important in any marketplace? Why does comics so desperately, as a hobby, need CBCS?
Well, it's almost like anything else. Imagine if there's only one comic book dealer, right? Or one comic book publisher. It would be kind of boring and it'd be very expensive. There wouldn't be a need for innovation because there is no competition. So imagine if Ford was still the only person making cars, right? When they came out, the gas mileage was terrible, of course. They were expensive, and they only came in black. As soon as there was competition, they started making their cars better. They added colors to the cars. So if there was no competition, Ford would still be making cars, and they'd be only in black, and you'd probably be getting like 8 miles to the gallon and paying $250,000 for a car because they're the only ones there. Without competition, there's no reason to keep prices low.
Now, there are other fields, other industries. I feel like we're getting a little feedback. Can you hear that?
No.
Okay, good. Maybe it's just on my end. In other fields, right, in other industries, there aren't what I would describe as monopolies. But comics are an industry where monopolies actually exist, right? Like Diamond is the one distributor of new comic books in the market. If you're not self-published, you got to go through Diamond, right?
Yep.
And for a long time, if you wanted encapsulation service, there was one game in town.
Right.
And, so I get it, and I think retailers get it, and I hope that enthusiasts get it as well. CBCS is integral to the health and fitness of the comic market. I want to talk a little bit about the process at CBCS from start to finish. What happens when a book is received by CBCS? What happens from start to finish? Can you kind of give us sort of some description of that?
Sure, I can give you something that's not going to bore people terribly.
Right, or take up the
Not
rest of
too
the
long.
podcast.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So books come in either walk in or through the mail. They get received by our receiving department.
Wait, time out. You can walk into CBCS?
Well, you make an appointment, yes.
All right.
Um,
It's hard to do that at your competitors. You can't do that.
You can't?
Not unless you're a retailer. You've got to have a special account to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It used to be when I was there that, anybody can
Times have changed.
Yeah.
You can't do that anymore. But anyway, please continue.
Well,
that's one cool difference.
Yeah, it makes it hobby friendly. So as the person who's receiving the books checks the books against the submission form, they make sure everything's there, of course, and that they should be in the right tiers. Then the bag or the Mylar gets barcoded, so you could track the book through our system. And it's done blind, so it doesn't say so and so's book. It just has a barcode and an invoice number that matches the invoice. And
so mass submitters don't get inadvertently preferential treatment simply because, oh, there's Bob again.
Right.
Yeah, we're glad he's submitting 1,000 books a month. Make sure I get my paycheck.
Right.
Okay, that's cool.
Exactly. I mean, if you submit one book, you submit 1,000, the books get graded the same way.
Super cool. Tell me more.
Well, once the books are finished in the receiving department, they put it into a box, which also has the barcode and label on it, and it shows the amount of books and which tiers they are. Then they enter into the safe. They get pulled out when it's time for the books to be graded. It goes to somebody to input all the information about the book if we haven't done it before. So they'll put in the publisher, the date, key comments, such as first appearances or death of a character or something very important to the storyline or the universe that it's taking place in, like the Marvel universe. And then gets put back into the box, then gets sent to pre-grading, where pre-graders look at the books, they count the pages, they give it a grade, they put notes into the system, like because we give free graders notes out. So we have a QR on the back of the label.
Also something that nobody else in the field does.
Well, we used to do that at CGC. It used to be free.
Times have changed. Tell me more.
Yes. So then the books, after the pre-graders do what they do, and one pre-grader can't see another pre-grader's grade.
That's cool.
So this way, they're not influenced by it. So then it comes to a finalizer, me. I check the notes against the book. I inspect the book myself, especially for restoration, because that's the toughest part of the job, actually. And I give it a grade I think it should get. I check my pre-graders' grades, and if we're all on the same page, the book just goes out the door and into encapsulation. If for some reason we're pretty far off, I check to see if I missed anything or the pre-graders missed anything. And if I'm still far off, I bring it over to another finalizer, which would be Wes Steffen, and see what he thinks the grade is. And 99% of the time, Wes and I are right on the money with each other, unless I miss something or he misses something, which, we're human. Once in a blue moon, you miss something. I don't care what kind of job you do, but everybody does miss something.
How many graders do you guys suggest that you employ, like if I had to give just a rough estimate?
What do you mean suggest? I mean,
Like, I mean, in other words, are there graders for modern tier, graders that do, that are more experienced, that look at older books, or people that have specific training for like ages or eras of books? And is there any overlap? And then as a total number, like how many people do you think are involved in the grading process that are actually giving numerical numbers, including the pre-screeners?
well, I mean, usually
I
you'll
know
have,
that's a tough question, right?
right. I mean, we have people that know so much. You want to hire people who have a lot of knowledge about comic books. You don't want to throw bodies at books. You want people with user experience, or if you hire somebody who's young and new, who's just a comic book collector, they need user training before they can start grading. They usually start off as inputting label information. Like once I mentioned, as I mentioned before, key comments and stuff like that. But yeah, we have people who specialize in Disney, people who specialize in Golden Age, people who specialize in modern. But there is a lot of cross, I guess, working together, and we learn from each other. When I first started with the competition, I didn't know as much as I know now about variants and things like that.
Yeah, like I know you guys have a guy specific for foreign language comics.
Yes, Tim Bildhauser. And what he does, he makes sure that the way it used to be is if comic books was written in Spanish, people would just say, "Oh, it's from Mexico." It could be from Brazil, could be from Mexico, could be from Spain. You have to know all this stuff. And Tim's probably one of the top experts in the world. So that's
I
what
can't think of anybody better.
No, I can't.
Yeah.
He's fantastic. We've done real well with the foreign market, bringing it, I guess, more to the collecting community than it was before.
Well, without doubt, that's your, I think, biggest innovative move here in the last year. I mean, you guys are really at the forefront of that, and it's a trend that's emerging. My question, I guess, is what's next for CBCS? How are you guys going to stay innovative and stay ahead of the game?
Wow. We just had a company-wide meeting, actually, to discuss all of this.
I'm already asking the tough questions. Watch
well,
out.
it's not that it's so
Here
much.
Here go the trade secrets.
Right, but
are you listening?
Everything
CGC?
Sorry,
I said, are you listening, CGC?
Yeah. I don't think they're worried about us yet. Well, I mean, I do think they're worried. We have taken quite a bit of the market share, but right now,
Ferrari wasn't worried about Ford either.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. But to go back to what's coming up, we try to keep everything very close to the vest until we're ready to announce it. We don't want people speculating. If you read chat boards, which I'm sure you do, you make an announcement and then 1,000 people will come on with their opinion about it before it even launches. And you hear all this really crazy and bad stuff about what's coming. And you hear good things too. But like I said, we try to keep everything that's coming as our announcement. We had just announced, about a month ago, the CBCS comic book expo that we're having. The 19th, 20th, and 21st of January, where people are coming in, and they paid to come in. They get a lot of free grading, get to spend time talking with the graders. There's special guest speakers like Buddy Saunders from mycomicshop.com, the largest seller of comic books on the web. He's been around forever. Fantastic guy. Donnie Cates, one of the hottest writers around, is coming to signings and do Q&A and talk with the guests. Sam De La Rosa, the artist, is coming as well. Chris Simon of I Like Comics is coming to talk about how to run a successful retail store, because he has an incredible retail store. He's actually having a signing this Saturday with the entire crew of Image, the founders. They like his store so much. So it should be a great time. But like I said, we made that announcement, 2 months ago.
Tickets still on sale?
I don't know. People can go to our website and find out. Go to, cbcscomics.com. And I'm not sure if it's filled up or not yet.
Now, you guys have a lot of functionality on the website. There's certainly the CGC boards, but there are also CBCS boards, which I've found to be, how can I just say this politely, a less abrasive forum to discuss comic books.
Well, it's less politics, and our moderators are really good about stopping arguments. We try to have a very fan-friendly feel to it.
Yeah, you guys are inviting to newcomers. I think, it does a pretty damn good job, I think, of self-policing. And, if you were a fan of comics, a comic enthusiast, being a member of that community is something I would certainly suggest. Yeah,
it's a great community. I'm on there every day, sometimes only for 5 minutes, but I try to answer as many questions as possible, try to help out new collectors, and discuss stuff with collectors that have incredible knowledge.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. You've been involved in comics for how long?
Oh, since I was a kid. I set up at my first Phil Suling show when I was a kid. It wasn't called a convention. It was called a comic book marketplace. It was held one Sunday of every month, and I couldn't even afford a full table. I set up with my friend Ricky Feldman, and I was able to afford half a table.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really great. I got to learn a lot. Of course, when you're young, you get burned a lot. People who know quite a bit take advantage of you, but you learn by getting burned. And I learned a lot quickly because I didn't want to be burned.
Yeah, I set up at my first Comic Con when I was 13. I found the receipt in a money box and was able to parlay it into a table at a show when I got back into comics by being like, look, dude, I bought my first table from you in 1992. How about put me on the list? And the guy was like, did I have hair back then? And put me on the list.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Back then in the 70s, you could basically get a table real easily. And
New York was around.
Oh, yeah. And you'd always hear somebody say, got a guide? Got a guide? And it's fantastic. That's going to be the 50th anniversary of Overstreet this year. What Bob and crew have done for this industry is incredible. Really.
Yeah, I feel like you and I are the only two people I know that are really excited, but I'm super excited about that.
There's a bunch of people that are excited.
I just don't know them.
Right.
Kind of the problem.
Right. Yeah. I've been around a couple of days longer. That's all.
There's no question about it. But that's why I'm so excited to talk to you about this. So you've seen some of the best books ever.
Yes.
Graded a dozen. I think I heard you say Action Ones.
Easily. Yeah. And
how many Suspense 3s have you held in your hand?
Probably about 9.
Wow.
Yeah, been very lucky. Though, by the way, that's the worst comic book ever written. Great cover, but I'll tell you, when I got my own copy, sat down and read it, I couldn't believe how bad it was. But that Schomburg cover is just unbelievable. It's one of the best ever.
That's neat. Can we talk about the dentist?
Dave, yeah. What would you
For
like?
those who don't know, talk to us about who this mythical figure is.
It's hard for me to picture him as a mythical figure. I've known him for so long. He's a great guy. He's just a comic book fanatic, especially Batman and Superman. And as many people know, he owns the best copies of Action 1 and Detective 27 known. I got to see them many years ago.
Wow.
They're fantastic. I mean, I got to hold them in my hands. Supposedly, I was the last person to ever see the Action 1 before he put it away for good. It is smoking. It was like seeing a unicorn. You just didn't believe it existed. And he's a very private person. But like I said, he loves the hobby. He's gotten his son into it. His son is a collector now as well. So I've known him for many, many years. Got out to visit him. I did the largest deal I ever did in my life was with him. I bought in '96. I bought the More Fun 52 Mile High for $115,000. That's the first appearance of the Spectre, and that was about 4 times guide back then. I thought I was crazy after I bought it. I was like, I could have bought a house. It was great owning it. I sold it so I could get the Flash 1 Mile High copy.
Oh.
That was another phenomenal book. I think Heritage had a record sale years and years later of it after I let go of it for I think $500,000. It's crazy.
Take my breath away. So can we talk a little bit about grading older books? Certainly, modern books are graded differently than even Copper Age or Silver Age or certainly Golden Age books, correct?
Well, all books are graded the same, but there's different printing defects through the eras. And so...
Can you explain that concept?
Okay. Comic books back, when they started, were there to sell advertising. It wasn't to sell a comic book per se, so kids could read it. It was so kids could read it and look at the ads and spend the money on the ads. And the publisher made money off the advertising. They didn't care if a book was miscut, if a book, if let's say the blade for cutting the comics got dull and would put bindery tears into comics. They didn't change it out or sharpen it as often as you would if it was for a perfect printing job. So we take up less for certain defects for certain eras, but we grade the books the same way. Does that make sense?
No, I think that's a perfect way of describing that. So, in other words, a Timely, an Atlas, a Fawcett, and a St. John's books, always graded the same, but there are specific printing defects that that affect certain publishers predominantly, that CBCS and private persons should be hip to and aware of, because they don't necessarily damage one book like they do other books. Is that sort of an apt way of describing that?
Sure. But if, like, let's say in the 40s, bindery chips on the top and bottom of the spine are very common. If it's too big, you still have to take off for it because it really affects the look of the book. So you're allowed certain manufacturing defects, but they can't be horrible or extreme.
Much like a binary tear.
Right.
On certain modern books, right?
Yeah.
Not a big deal
until
they are.
Right. If you look at the really thick books that are being printed today, the super thick ones all have a little bit of tearing at the top and bottom spine, so you don't take off for it.
Saga 1, for example.
No, thick books. Saga 1 is a thin book. I'm talking about like 64 pages or something like that.
Okay.
They all have a little bindery tear at the top and bottom. Most Saga 1s don't have a bindery tear.
Interesting. Well, that's good to know. Let me ask you this. What are some of the defects that you guys see all the time with modern books, like color rubs, for example, on like the Thanos 13 variant that get considered, they're just not considered as harshly as other books? Or are there some specific examples that you can give the people that are listening?
Well, I mean, the inks that were being
Marvel,
used,
for example.
by Marvel, right, weren't very stable on the back cover. So when it rubbed against the board, you would get white. So you have to be very careful about pulling them in and out of bags and boards. But we do take off for the color rubbing. We just don't take off as much on certain books as we do others.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of these big books, because you're somebody who I can ask sort of these historical questions that I think will have an answer for me that nobody else really can. So there's different printings of Tech 27, Marvel Comics #1. Is that accurate?
As far as I know, there was only one printing of Tech 27.
They didn't come out on like different dates, like Action 1.
But
do you know what I'm talking about?
Marvel Comics 1 did go back to press. There's an October copy and a November copy.
Okay.
And what they did was they covered up the October with November on the cover. That's all.
Okay.
But most of the time, there was no second printings back in the day.
They weren't just like released a few months later?
No.
Okay, that's just all. Okay, that's something that I've heard repeated time and time again. And I just didn't know whether or not that was innuendo and rumor or not. Let me ask you this. You were kind enough to send us a number of different graphics. Can we sort of go through some of these books and talk about some of the stuff? Because I find them just fascinating, okay?
Oh, sure. I just sent you some graphics, to put up if you needed them, but sure.
Yeah, well, like, for example, how many different times do you get to see books like this?
Well, you don't see them in 9/8, but I see Hulk 181 pass through my desk sometimes 20 times a day. Sometimes they're in really, really rough shape, like 1.5. I mean, really bad. And once in a while, I get lucky and you see something like a 9/8. It's very tough to get a 9/8.
That's not the kind of book that is going to, cause you to run into another room and be like, hey, you got to check this out?
Back in the day, yeah. Now I don't even think about it.
What are some of the books that will still get you to run around the office and be like, hey, if you haven't seen one of these before, check this out?
Most of the time it's very strange, esoteric, golden age books that
Like
I
Mask 1 and 2?
actually that's a little more popular. But yeah, what I'll do is if I get a high grade copy of Mask 1 or 2, I would probably show it off to some of the younger people out there at the office and say, hey, if you haven't seen this, you should see this. You'll never see this in high grade again for many years.
What are some of the esoteric PCH books that you're thinking of?
Oh, wow. I'm really not. Sorry. I said it's when it hits my desk, I go, wow, I've never seen this book. Or I've never seen this in high grade. The foreign comics that are coming across my desk are so much fun because I haven't had a chance to see them before. People talk about Action One, and it doesn't do much for me anymore, besides the fact that it's a really cool book. I mean, I've owned 2 copies myself, but it really is a great book and probably one of the greatest comics ever. I mean, it's the first Superman. And yeah, the newer people in the office or the younger people in the office get a real kick out of seeing it. I get a kick that we got it in and we get to put it into our holder. But like it could be a really cool Sea Devils, a DC that's really hard to find from the early 60s. And I get it in and it's a 9.8. I can't believe it. I'm like, I never see this book in this kind of grade. At the same time, sometimes I get excited when I'm doing moderns. On a Saturday, I come in and I grade a lot of moderns. And I'm like, this is the coolest cover. And I didn't buy the book itself. And I'm like, this is just great. And it might be a Gabriel Dell'Otto cover or something like that, but I'm just like, wow, this is fantastic. I'm just a comic book fanatic, so it doesn't matter.
Are you reading any modern books?
Sorry?
Are you reading any modern books?
Yeah, but I don't buy single issues. I buy trades. They're much easier to travel with. So I'm about, anywhere from 9 to 15 months behind on my reading. I just started reading an independent book. See if I can find it in my stack here. Called Stoker and Wells, Order of the Golden Dawn. And it's by Stephen Peros and Barry Orkin.
Yeah, I've no idea what that is.
Yeah, it's really cool. My friend J.C. Vaughn was the editor on it, sent me a copy, and I'm really digging it. I'm also reading The Mr. Miracle Trade by Tom King. It's a lot of fun. And just got in Planet of the Apes and Green Lantern. I'm a fan of both, so going to be reading that next.
Yeah. So for people who are listening, if they're on the show floor, can you talk to them about, because look, I've been doing this a long time. I still get nervous about trimmed books, catching restoration. Black lights work a little bit, some of, whatever, but they don't catch it all, obviously. And
Right.
As far as like glue, other than like sticking my tongue on the spine, which you can't do with someone else's book, I don't know what to do.
Well,
You
I mean,
can't see it, obviously.
well, one of the easiest things to do is rub your thumb gently along the spine of the comic. And if you feel something rough, well, paper shouldn't be rough. That's one way to tell about glue on the spine. Basically, just you have to study these books. Like I said, I learned by getting burned. Same thing when I was young. I bought a lot of books from certain dealers that either didn't know or didn't want to disclose the restoration. It's one of the reasons.
Wait a second. When you were young, resto was not a big deal, because when I was young, resto was not a big deal.
Oh, it's always been around.
Absolutely, but it was way more acceptable back in the day. I mean, Christ, people advertised that, you know, like, I've got a great restoration service in the Comic Buyer's Guide, like, you know, and other publications that were before Wizard. Like, it was a thing. People were quite proud of it.
They didn't sell for the same price unless it was undisclosed.
I mean, the market's changed profoundly, right?
Oh, the market changed quite a bit. I mean, in the 80s, I was looking for books that were totally untouched. And like I said, I got burned. Trimming is one of the hardest things to tell if it's done correctly. I mean, micro trimming, anybody who says that they can tell you 100% of the time if it's been trimmed is a liar. It's really, really, really tough, and you have to train your eyes.
I mean, you need the same book, right, to like line up on top of it?
No, because a lot of the books weren't cut the same way. As you can tell by all the miscuts, especially on Silver and Bronze Age books and older. Newer books, it's easier to tell. But you know, the Marvels had the overhangs, top and bottom, and sometimes, you know, on the right side. And if it's trimmed, if it's micro trimmed correctly, it's almost impossible to tell, and you can't put books on top of each other. Now, if you took, say, like the Thanos 13 you were talking about, those are all the same size. So if somebody trimmed it, it would look smaller. But they'd have to trim the cover and the pages, not just the cover. With restoration, you just look at enough books.
Well, I mean, Steve, the way you describe that, I mean, it sounds like you can't tell.
Not 100% of the time. It's really, really tricky.
Well, I mean, are you trying to say that CBCS misses trimming, CGC misses trimming, and like have at it? People should start trimming their books.
No.
Right. Well, obviously not.
Right, but there's a real skill to being able to get it past the grading services, and people do it. There was a really bad time at our competition where this gentleman, Jason Ewart, was trimming books and getting it past everybody. The only way we were able to tell was because he was cracking them out of holders. So there was before pictures and after pictures. It was a hobby that came together to stop this guy. It's like I said, we catch it 99% of the time, but I'll tell you, if nobody can catch it 100% of the time.
Yeah, and I want to sort of dig in on this issue, which is that it's a hobby that came together to stop it. Do you think that there is a duty that each of us as members of the community have to make sure that restoration is disclosed, trim books are disclosed, to be transparent and to be good guardians of the integrity of these artifacts for one another?
Oh, I truly believe that. I mean, I love this hobby, and my good friends love the hobby as well, and we try to police it as best as possible. But if people were honest, and as well as very, very, very informed, you wouldn't need certification.
And that's why it's so important that we have these services, right? For newer collectors to have some level of confidence that 99% of the time they can trust that this very expensive investment is in the exact grade that it's been given by CBCS as a service, that you guys as a multifaceted ambassador to the comic community have taken time and care to ensure that the books receive the proper grade, that they've been inspected for color touch and glue and these other sorts of things so that they can buy with confidence.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, certification was started as basically a good housekeeping seal of approval in a way. eBay, as I always say, was like the Wild West. You didn't know what you were buying. So certification came about because of the internet, mostly. Because now you could put a book up and as a seller, and people now have confidence in what they're buying. Before, you'd get a book in from eBay, and let's say the guy didn't count the pages or didn't care that the centerfold was missing, but you get the book in and the centerfold's missing. It was kind of a bummer. Or there was, undisclosed restoration, like we were talking about. But things like writing on pages. I've seen some of the craziest stuff where somebody went through the book and penciled in all the characters' eyes on every panel. It's really important to learn page counts. And a good resource is comics.org. It's a really good resource because some people don't know that the pinup page is missing or an ad page is missing because it doesn't affect the story. Most people don't count pages. I learned at a young age to count pages.
Do you want to tell people how to count pages for those that don't know? Because a lot of people don't know how to do that.
That's why I was saying that comics.org is a great resource. It'll give you the page count.
Sure, but they don't know that you count the front cover, front inside cover. You know what I mean? Do you want to explain that?
Right. So when we count pages, we don't count the cover as pages. So on your basic, Silver Age and up book, there's 8 pages. 8 folios, 16 pages. Right. And so if you're going to count pages on that kind of stuff, it's pretty basic. When you get to Golden Age books from the war, they have different page counts because sometimes they would leave a page out to save paper. There's a large paper drive during the war and everything. That's why I said for any novice, I would definitely go to comics.org. It's going to help them quite a bit. One of the things that people don't catch a lot of the time is a married cover to the interior. So they might have the.
Can you explain what that term means?
Married. Sure. When you take a part of another book and marry it into, or if it's a cover onto, a copy of another book. Sometimes it's the same book, but I've seen it where they've married, the cover for Fantastic Four #5 onto Fantastic Four #6. I know it sounds weird, but people just don't look inside the book when they're buying it sometimes. And you need to look at the book and learn about the books. I guess a double-edged sword is about certification is that people don't have to learn, right? They could just buy slab books and be happy. They know it's been checked. The bad part.
I'll never read a Suspense 3 now.
Yeah, right. Keep it in the holder.
If I ever get my hands on one, I'm going to be like, don't open that.
Nah, you should read it.
Steve told me under no circumstances should I open that.
No, I did not say
I
that.
believe him.
But so like I said, if people really want to learn, that what they do is they go to conventions and just look through stock and make friends with other people who've been in the hobby longer. That's what I did when I was younger, and learn from the best. I'm very, very happy that when I was growing up, I had people like James Payette, who's a fantastic dealer in New Hampshire, very honest, was teaching me stuff. I became friends with Bob Overstreet. He taught me things. Um, like we talked about how the community comes together to stop bad things. Well, we should come together to work together and teach each other. And that's why the chat boards are so good.
Yeah.
Because you have people who've been collecting forever and people who just started collecting, and everybody learns from each other. It's a real community.
Oh, music to my ears. You and I see that very much the same way. I'm afraid, unfortunately, we may be minority voices, or perhaps some of the other voices are just a little louder. But it's certainly the message that I think needs to be shared more often than it is, which is this is one of the last bastions for apprenticeship and mentorship. And we very much are a community and one that should take care of one another. That it's not a zero-sum game where we need to step on one another's heads to try to get ahead.
Right. I mean, it's supposed to be a hobby. It's supposed to be fun. And if I didn't enjoy it, I could be making money somewhere else. Grading stacks of mid-grade marbles isn't my favorite thing to do in the day, but I do it because I'd rather be working in comics than anything else. But just because I have to grade those stacks doesn't mean I don't get great books across my desk. I show them off every day on the CBCS chat board. There's a thread, cool books that hit my grading desk. I just put up a really high grade Spider-Man one about a week ago. And people love seeing books. And I love handling them. I love reading them. I love teaching people about them. And I love talking about them. The best.
Was this that book?
No. But
all right, well, if it was and I ruined the surprise for that guy, I'm sorry.
No. That's fine. That was a one-day book. It went in and out. Our tiers are based on value.
Yeah, are you guys doing anything on site?
Not really. On-site grading is doing a disservice to everybody. It helps make money for the dealers at the shows.
Absolutely.
It does help get books back to people faster who need the books back faster. But if a book is sitting in your collection, do you care if it's sitting in our vault or if it's in your box?
I think the answer to that is a lot of people care if it's sitting in your vault. Yeah, I mean, on-site grading is super popular, but mistakes happen. It's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to do with short turnaround time.
It burns out graders. You're not sitting in the same light and the same scenario, same place you sit all the time to grade.
So let's talk about light, for example, because I find that when I go to shows, I feel like I'm in a jewelry store. Like the twinkle hurts my eyes, and when I actually grade books, I want to be in a dark room with like one source of light coming in so I can get the refractive light to really sense where there's imperfections. How critical is light? And can you kind of talk about the optimal conditions to grade books and so forth?
Well, the optimal condition is to always have the same lighting. We don't sit in the dark. You want to actually grade the same way most people would grade if they're at a store or if they're at a convention. You want light all around you. But you have to train your eye to catch the minutia defects. It just comes from years of looking at the same books over and over and over again. But you want heavy light hitting that book. It's so you can see every defect. But if you just have your, the way you set up at home, you might want to do what you said, like turn the lights off and have just two really heavy duty lamps, looking straight down the book.
Yeah, I kind of do a lot of different things. You know what I mean?
Well, how do you do it?
Well, I like you described, right? Like, so, I take different looks at the same book from different ways, right? But for me, it's really about refractive light, so that I can see what's there and what's not there. But I like, for example, I like the yellow ball. There's like certain bulbs. I don't know what they're actually called that you buy that do a better job of that for me. But I assume everybody sees different, and everybody's eyes are different. So everything is different for everyone. Like I use cheaters sometimes, and I look at different books from different grades differently. Or different books from different ages differently, because I'm looking for like different things. You know what I mean? Like modern books, it's like, who really cares? I find a defect that's not going to a grading company. It's a wrap.
I guess, but the way I do it is I treat a Spawn 1 the same way I treat an Action 1. I have to look at
Spawn 1 being your most submitted book?
No, I don't think so.
What is the most submitted book?
Wow, I wouldn't know right now. Like I said, I don't handle a lot of the moderns.
Okay.
So I don't to see all the moderns that come in. But once there's a movie announced, right, all of a sudden you'll see Ms. Marvel 1 coming through the door like crazy. So your most submitted book sometimes depends on what's being announced for TV or movie. But Hulk 181 is one of the most submitted books you'll ever see.
Yeah. Do you think it's the most resubmitted book?
Probably. Everybody's hoping for a better grade. Some people crack and press and hope for a better grade. Sometimes the pressing won't help. If it's a 2-inch crease that breaks color, just because you made the book flatter, the 2-inch crease that breaks color is still there. It won't raise the grade of the book.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Do you have an opinion about the pressing phenomenon, the dry cleaning phenomenon? It was a thing 10 years ago.
It was a thing 30 years ago, but most people didn't talk about it.
Right. Okay. Now, yeah. Right. It was like Fight Club. And it was different the way people did it. They'd remove the staples from books.
Different.
You know what I mean? Like you can tell how old the person who taught the current presser was, or how long they've collected based upon how they teach them to press.
Sometimes, yeah. But there's people who just go on YouTube and see a pressing video and they start pressing, and they're terrible. We see such bad pressing come in that we actually downgrade for the damage that the pressing has done. You need to use a professional presser, and not
talk about the damages, please.
Well, we see a lot of moisture rippling. See a lot of color lift, and skewed books, books that were pressed so the spine is kind of crushed, but yet didn't get the dents out of the book.
Yeah.
See water spot damage from too much humidifying. Pressing has really evolved. The reason it was never considered restoration is nothing was added to the book. So that's why we'll take off for bad pressing. We'll downgrade. But if you were to show me a book that came from, let's say, the Mile High at your church collection, they look pressed. They're so perfect.
Pancake.
No, they're not pancaked. It's actually as if a professional presser did it. They look fantastic.
When people say pancakes, they're talking about
the books with the squished spines, things like that.
Any idiot can make pancakes.
Yeah, anybody can make a pancake.
Right?
Yes.
But leaving the poof or whatever you want to call it in a book is a real art form.
Yes. You really need to know what you're doing. And I've seen so many books ruined from bad pressing. It makes me sick. People really need to research. I mean, to even learn how to press, you have to ruin about 1,000 books beforehand. So you have to, buy a bunch of junk books, and that's only for moderns and copper stuff like that. You can actually humidify a book too much, and it'll shrink the cover if it's a Silver Age book. And like I said, you can take color log.
Then appears trimmed.
Sorry?
Can it then appear trimmed?
It does appear trimmed. And to the untrained eye, you would think it's trimmed. I know the difference between, shrinkage and trimming.
There's a dirty joke there, but I'm not going to make it.
Good.
So, I've had you hostage here for an hour, and I don't want to keep you forever. But if you would let me keep asking you some questions, I really do appreciate it. Can we talk about some of the evolution of the comic market? I mean, there's been so much change that's happened in the last decade and in the last 20 years. I mean, it's as if the hobby has evolved into something that's so much more sophisticated than I had ever hoped and dreamed for. What are some of the changes that you think are going to happen over the course of the next 5-10 years?
Oh, wow. I think you'll see CBCS become a larger force in the hobby. I think more people will gravitate towards certification. If you look around a convention, you'll see more ungraded books than graded books, certified books than uncertified, I should say. I think you'll see more and more. I think people are more and more into signatures every year. It's weird because they want them on the cover. When I was growing up, we wanted them on the margin of the first page.
Right.
I'm still not a fan of it, but people love it. So if
the cover signatures as opposed to the interior signatures.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's thankfully for guys like you and I think there's a movement to go back to the interiors of books. Thank God.
Well, I'm not seeing it.
Well, I don't think those books are coming to you. Although you would think that they would be with CBCS's witness verification program.
And our verified signature program, where BAS authenticates the signature on older books. Most of those are on the first page. Because back in the day, I never went up to Jack Kirby and had him sign my book on the cover. I had him sign them on the bottom of the first page. So we see a lot of vintage signatures, and quite a bit because we're the only people who do vintage signature certification and authentication. Frank Frazetta, all sorts of people, but you see them signed usually on the first page or a major splash or the first page of the story they did in that book. So let's say the story, it was like, say, A Mystery in Space that had multiple stories. You'd see Carmine Infantino's autograph on the bottom of the first page of the story that he did, even though it was, the second story in the book.
Yeah, let me ask you this. Any move toward, I know that, like, here's sort of like the gripes I hear about CBCS, right?
Mm-hmm.
Turnaround times are terrible, and you guys have resolved that.
Right. We're down to, at this point, the slowest tiers are taking 5 weeks, which
pretty impressive.
blows away our competition.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. The other one is, I hate your case, right? Like, because people will say PGX has the nicest case in the industry. You can use it to stop a bullet or, kill a zombie if there's an apocalypse. But for whatever reason, people aren't real thrilled with the CBCS case. Any move towards a new case? Is that something that you guys, evolve or develop every so many years? You kind of take a look at it, or are we, or is the case that we have right now the one that we're going to have for the next 10 years?
There's going to be an announcement pretty soon. Oh. But we're also
stole that one.
We're gonna
report on that one. My comic book resources. Gotcha.
Yeah.
News or
one thing we will keep. Yeah, the one thing we would keep is the clarity. People do love the clarity of our cases.
Yeah, and the other thing that people love about your cases is that you acknowledge pedigrees where others won't. Can you talk about that?
That's not true. The pedigrees are acknowledged by our competition as well.
Sure, but not like you guys do. You're much more liberal with your acknowledgement of pedigrees
than
anybody.
Collections.
I'm sorry?
You're talking about collections.
Correct. Yeah, talk to me about that.
Okay, so a collection is not pedigree worthy, but it's really special. So we recognize certain collections.
Does anybody else do that?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is no. So
yeah, I mean, I'd like to say no, but I don't want to be wrong.
Okay, and you differentiate that from pedigrees,
right? And so we say from the collection of, or the personal collection of, as opposed to Edgar Church Mile High copy in the pedigree field. So pedigree field of our label. The collection is written on the bottom of the label. It says from the personal collection of. It never says pedigree. I think that our
what are the requirements for that?
It has to be a large collection. It has to be noteworthy. But it's not a pedigree where every book is super high grade. It doesn't always have all the keys. Where pedigrees really need to be really heavily entrenched in high grade and keys, or something special. It doesn't have to be large. There's for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it, and I should, because I deal with it every day. There's a pedigree with about 50 books, but they're all #1 Golden Age books, and found by James Payette. The Allentowns. That's what I was looking for. And they're fantastic, so they deserve a pedigree. Um, but if somebody had a random 50-book collection that was high grade, we wouldn't call it a pedigree. We might call it a collection.
Nice. Here's kind of, I guess, sort of where I want to leave the interview, because I do appreciate your time, but I don't want to keep you
no
hostage. Steve, I think we are really at a renaissance in the comic book collecting market. I mean, there's no better time, at least in my lifetime, than now to collect comics. And you've talked a little bit about where you see the market trending towards. Oh, well, here, let me do this. Before there's a couple questions that I promised I'd get answered from the live chat, and I'd like to do those. One is, can you talk a little bit about, before we go, and again, I promise I won't keep you hostage for too much longer, the Pence variants, for lack of a better description, of like Tomb of Dracula 1 and some of these other big books. They all came out off the press around the same time. Is that right? The UK editions. For FF1, AF15, silver, bronze. What's the deal there?
Well, the Pence copies are the same exact, or UK editions are the same exact book as the American version. It just has a Pence price on it as opposed to an American price on it.
Yeah, people don't like them though. They look right, like Canadian price variants, for lack of a better description, command a premium the vast majority of the time. Pence books are they're not as expensive, right? Is that fair to say?
Well, I think there's becoming more of a change where the prices are going up on the Pence copies. But I guess because comic books are an American art form, right? People want what they think is the original, which would be published in America.
But the Pence, my understanding at least, is they were all published at the same time, right?
That's my understanding too. Tim Bildhaus would know better if, like, say, FF1 was done 2 months later. But I'm 99% sure that they were done at the same time.
Yeah, and then the other question that I missed in the live chat that I don't want to ignore is, if you would elaborate. You said the new cases will retain the clarity. Tell me more.
Well, we'll still be using PETG as the interior well, which is really just a beautiful, crystal clear view of the book. But as always, we want to evolve, and we want to make the case more appealing.
Okay. And then the other thing that I guess I didn't mention that I think is important for people who aren't familiar with CBCS books, you guys specifically delineate and denote books that present exceptionally well for the grade.
Yes. We put a check mark next to the grade.
Yeah, there's like a separate service for that shit, right? Like that other
there's
companies.
Service, yeah, that
or two.
Yeah, they put a sticker on the
yeah, there's one or two, but you guys would have no need for that, at least to the extent that you're already doing that for customers, and it's right there on the label with a check mark.
Right. It means check the grader's notes, because once again, they're free. We also don't want somebody looking at the book going, wow, this 7.5, they really misgraded this. It looks like a 9. But if they check the grader's notes, they'll see that there's a 2-inch tear on the 3rd page.
Nice.
You
Very
can't
cool.
see that through the holder.
Yeah, very cool. No, I like that a lot. Okay, so what I was trying to ask here at the end was this, because I just more than anything really treasure your perspective. It is something that is truly unique and informed in a way that I admire from a lifelong labor of love in the comic industry. So here we are at this renaissance, I believe, in the comic collectors market. And you talked a little bit about how you anticipate that there will be more third-party graded books at conventions, for example. And you guys now have a service where you'll grade books without encapsulating them, correct?
Sure, it's called the raw grade. It's really mostly for retail stores. It's a inexpensive way of having a book graded without the full restoration check. Though if we see restoration, we notate that the book's been altered. But this way they can just send the book in, we grade it an 8.0, and they don't have to say that they're the ones who graded the book the 8.0. It makes it easier for them to sell it.
Yeah, and I was thinking more along the lines of this, because you guys, you specifically, are seeing more books that are being submitted by collectors than arguably anybody in the world. What kind of trends do you see emerging? Like, from your involvement with the CBCS boards and what you're seeing with the advent of television and film properties, really influencing the habits of collectors to renewed interest in pulps and romance books and foreign edition comics. If you had to, and obviously we're not going to hold you to them, make some speculative predictions. We are comicbookspeculation.com about the direction of the market here in the next 5 to 10 years. For a guy who's fascinated with how these trends emerge, what are some of the things that you think have potential to really spark and catch fire, or you think are already beginning to kindle into a raging inferno in the comic market?
Well, you're already seeing some of it. Like you mentioned, the romance comics. I mean, those were dead for years. And now to find high-grade romance, people are going nuts for them. You find a high-grade 50s romance, DC, it's almost impossible to find. These were mostly read by girls, and they weren't taken care of. And now people are realizing how rare and high grade these things truly are. And some people have known it for years and years. But I think as we become more of a global community, and we're more because of chat boards and things like Facebook, social media, we're learning from each other. And because of that, we're branching out. When I say we, I mean each collector or each hobbyist is branching out and finding new and exciting things. Like how cool the romance comics really are, how good the artwork was on certain books, and
yeah, the interiors for the Matt Baker books. I mean, holy cow! His splash pages and interior panel work is some of the most amazing stuff I've ever seen in my entire life. They are truly beautiful.
Absolutely, and we spoke briefly about TVs and movies. I think these trends are going to follow with the investors and the speculators on every time a new movie and new TV show is announced. I think that the movies and the TV shows are bringing in new people but I don't know if they're bringing them into comics. Some, but not, not everybody goes to see Avengers, goes out and buys an Avengers comic. And also, it's tough to get into an Avengers comic if you just go buy one off the news. I'm so old, I say newsstand still.
No, I get it. You and me both.
But if you go to your comic shop and you buy the newest issue of the Avengers, it could be so convoluted. It could be a 10-issue crossover with other titles. Marvel's rebooted what, like 6 times in the past?
Oh, Lord have mercy. Yeah, who knows? It's horrific. It drives me insane.
But
well intentioned.
It brings in new readers, but it hurts readers like me, where I don't read as much Marvel and DC anymore. I read more independent stuff.
You and me both, my friend.
I think independent's going to be going to grow even larger than it is.
Yeah, no question about it. Boy, this has just been awesome. So since I've got you on the spot, can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
Will you promise to come back?
Absolutely.
My friend, thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I hope I answered everything you needed me to. But if not, just reach out and we can do this again.
A wealth of knowledge and transparency. I want to thank Steve Borock from the bottom of my heart. If you haven't had the opportunity to send some books to CBCS, please do it. If you're just out there trying to scalp books that you think you can grab from CBCS because they were graded harder than they are at the competition, crack them, reslab them, and make a profit. Remember the impact you can have by honoring the integrity of this beloved hobby and sending them to the absolute best. Please do yourself a favor and look at the wealth of knowledge on the CBCS boards. Steve kindly gives his time to answer questions there and is truly available as a resource that is invaluable and priceless. Steve, from comicbookspeculation.com and the Comic Book Wars podcast, we thank you from the bottom of our heart. It has been an honor, my friend.
Oh, thanks very much. I hope you don't mind. Do you mind if I give a shout out to
No.
where people can reach us and stuff?
The floor is yours. Tell us.
Well, you can follow me on Instagram under Steve Borock. I post almost daily cool books that hit my grading desk. Once again, as you mentioned, if you go to cbcscomics.com, you can go to the forum there and join the chat board, or you could just find out more information about us. We have a Facebook group, of course, CBCS Comics, where people from our company come on and answer questions as well. And we have show off books there. But yeah, that's enough self-promotion for now.
Thank you so much for your honesty and for spending this time with me. It means the world to all of us. The work that you've done to better this community. We are the recipients of your labor of love. You are a legend, my friend. And,
I doubt it, but thank you very much. You're too kind. I'm very honored to be on here. It's very nice of you to invite me. Thank you.
Talk to you soon, guys. Thanks, listeners.
Thank you.